Good evening. I'd like to talk to you about what's happening to your energy bills and what the government is going to do to help. Following Ofgem's decision today to increase the energy price cap, I know that many of you are feeling anxious. But I want to reassure you, the plans I set out in Parliament today are going to help you and your family. Now, anyone who tells you there's an easy answer to this situation is not being straight with you. The reasons prices are rising are global. A difficult winter last year depleted global gas stores. There's been disruption to other energy sources like nuclear and wind. And we've seen higher demand for gas in Asia. All those factors are outside of the government's control. There is, in truth, nothing the British government can do about a nuclear power plant going offline in Europe or a factory in China deciding to produce more goods. But what we can do is take the sting out of the price shock as we and the world adjust to higher energy prices. Without government action, today's increase in the price cap would leave households needing to find, on average, an extra £693 this year. That is clearly a very significant sum. So, for the vast majority of families, the government is taking direct action to share the burden. Today, we're announcing an energy bills rebate worth £350. You'll receive that cash support through two different routes. First, all electricity customers will receive an upfront discount worth £200. That discount will then be automatically repaid from people's bills over the next 5 years in equal instalments of £40 a year, starting next April. This is the right way to support people while continuing with our responsible plans to reduce borrowing and debt. Second, we will pay a council tax rebate of £150 to all households in bands A to D, which covers around 4 out of every 5 households in England. The reason for doing this through the council tax system is because it's the quickest way to get monies to the families who most need it. If you're eligible, the rebate will be paid in April, and it won't need to be repaid. In total, we're helping the vast majority of families pay their energy bills with £350. Our plan is right. It is fair. And I hope it will help ease the anxiety that millions of people feel about rising energy costs by sharing the burden between us all. Thank you. I'd be very happy to take some questions, and I think first up, have we got Jonathan from the BBC? Jonathan, hi.
Thank you, Chancellor. The support you've announced today is aimed at helping households this year. But industry experts expect high gas prices to persist. Isn't the reality that higher energy prices are here to stay and that you will have to come back with further support in future? If not, are you willing to rule that out at this point? And a follow-up, if I may, can I ask for your reaction to the resignation of the Prime Minister's head of policy, Munira Mirza, and whether you agree with her that he should apologise for his comments to Sir Keir Starmer about Jimmy Savile?
Thanks, Jonathan. So taking a step back about energy prices, as I mentioned, the factors that are driving higher gas prices are global in nature, and I went through them in my statement, and I don't have a crystal ball as to what exactly the future holds. But I want to be honest with people, higher energy prices are something that we're going to have to adjust to in common with other countries around the world, and it would be wrong to pretend otherwise. But what we can do is slow that adjustment to make it more manageable for people's household budgets, and that's what our interventions do. You're right, energy bills may go up again in October. The rebate that I announced today, the £200 off all energy bills, that will kick in October, so it will actually help with that. But over time, we'll have to see what happens. As I said, this is something that we're going to have to get used to, but the interventions today will help that adjustment happen in better time. And with regard to the news about Munira, the first thing to say is, she was a valued colleague. I very much enjoyed working with her, and I'm sorry to see her leave government. I'll miss working with her. And with regard to the comments, being honest, I wouldn't have said it, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister clarified what he meant. Next, Robert, where are you?
I'm here.
Hi.
Very good to see you. You've announced you're deploying something like £9 billion in total. Everybody will be helped a bit, but there's still going to be a price rise of 350 quid at least for everybody on average. Now, you know that it's the poorest third of people who are hurt most by these energy price rises. Why didn't you deploy that 9 billion and simply help the poorest third? If you believed in levelling up, surely that's what you would have done. And I do just want to quote a couple of lines from Munira Moza's resignation letter. She says she believes it was wrong for the Prime Minister this week to imply that Keir Starmer was personally responsible for allowing Jimmy Savile to escape justice. There was no fair or reasonable basis for that assertion. The Prime Minister hasn't apologised. He's explained, but he hasn't said sorry. Surely he should say sorry.
Thanks, Robert. So on your first question, of course, there are choices that we have to make when we're designing a policy like this. My view was that the price rise is so significant that it's not just those families who are on benefits that are going to feel the pinch. It's actually middle-income families as well, families that are working hard, they're not on welfare, but this will be a significant increase for them. And I wanted to make sure that support we provided also went to those families. That's why we've decided to go to bands A to D, which is 4 out of every 5 households in England, very deliberately to help those families in the middle as well. So that's a deliberate choice. But if you look at what we're doing, because it's flat rate, it's a flat £200 and a flat £150, that obviously is going to mean more to a family on lower incomes or with lower energy bills. So in that sense, it is a progressive measure that will help those families more. And we have various other interventions that are also targeted at exactly the people that you rightly highlight. For example, the Warms Homes discount is a rebate that exists through energy bills. We've expanded that eligibility, or we're in the process of doing that, by a third. So that will then cover 3 million of our most vulnerable households. That's a £150 rebate. We're also spending over the course of this Parliament about £3 billion specifically targeted on the people that you mentioned to help improve the energy efficiency of their homes. Now, that's a sensible long-term thing to do, because even though it costs thousands of pounds up front, it will save those people on average about £290, £300 a year on their energy bills going forward. And of course, by cutting the universal credit taper rate, by increasing the national living wage, both of those are really significant interventions which will put more money in the pockets of those who are most vulnerable. So I think if you look at it in the round, I feel confident that we're getting help to the people who need it in different ways. And look, with regard to your second question, it's a question for the Prime Minister rather than me, and there's probably not much more I can add other than what I've already said, which I hopefully appreciate. Next, Ed, there you are. Hi.
Chancellor, yeah. You talked a lot during the pandemic about doing whatever it takes to try and help families when they're going through difficult times. I'm just wondering, given what you said about how difficult this is going to be to confront, are you able to make the same commitment when it comes to their energy bills, whether it's looking specifically at their bills or indeed looking at things like our net zero policy and working out the way that it feeds into this? And just secondly, what's your message to people who are looking at their bills, they're looking at what you're offering them, and they're saying this simply isn't enough, and now they're contemplating a very difficult few months ahead?
I think the first thing to say is I absolutely recognise this is a difficult time. Right? I know this is probably the number one issue on most families' minds. They're looking at the news, they're seeing prices go up, they're worried about the cost of living, and in particular energy, and that's why we're taking action. And I really believe that what we're doing, £350, it's a significant amount of money that will make a big difference to the vast majority of households. And I think people, I hope, actually will be reassured by us stepping in to provide that support to ease some of the adjustment that this is. So, when you ask, what's our approach? Our approach over the last year or two has been to do the right things to support people through difficult times, to support the economy when it needed it. And I think today's announcement continues in that vein. And as in Robert's question, we're trying to get the balance right and getting support to the people who need it most. But I'm also being honest with everybody. I can't change global energy prices. Your point about our transition to net zero is a good one. And what we need to do is we've got to put the right long-term energy policy in place. And for example, we're investing in new nuclear power. That's something that previous governments had neglected, but we're fixing that. The Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, is brilliantly getting on with that. We announced money for that in last year's spending review. We're also doing lots of offshore wind, where we're a leader. Those are sensible things to do. And lastly, we probably I want to make sure that people acknowledge that we should also exploit our domestic resources. And we have resources in the North Sea, want to encourage investment in that, because we're going to need natural gas as part of our transition to getting to net zero. And in the process of getting from here to there, if we can get investment in the North Sea, that supports British jobs, that's a good thing. So that has to be part of the mix as well. Jason from the Daily Mail. Jason, where are you? Oh, there you are.
Hi. The Bank of England says we're facing the biggest squeeze on living standards on record. Isn't this the time to think again about that national insurance rise that's going to hit average workers with an extra £250 bill this year? And on the kind of wider political picture, the PM said sorry about some of the parties that took place in this street. Some of your MPs and certainly the public are still very angry with him. You, I think, are still supporting him. Why do you think, what would you tell people about why he should be given a second chance?
So, Jason, on the first question about the health and social care levy, I do believe this is the right thing to do. If you think, what's the country's number one priority when it comes to public services, it's the NHS. And we're faced with a situation where the backlogs are growing to unacceptable levels as a result of COVID. And I think everyone wants to see action on that. We'll get to a point where almost every family will have a family member, grandparent, aunt, uncle who's on a waiting list. And that's something that we didn't want to see happen. And at the same time, I think we wanted to do what other governments have not done. And the Prime Minister deserves credit for this. And that's grappling with the challenges in fixing social care. Both of those things are big challenges to take on. And they do require a serious amount of funding. Now, we wanted to do the difficult decision. Of course, it's a difficult decision to introduce a new levy. It's not something I would wanted to have to do, but confronted with a once in 300-year economic shock to deal with and taking on these two big challenges, I thought it was right, as did the Prime Minister and the government, to introduce a new levy to help fund the people's number one priority, not just today, but for years into the future. And I think people can be reassured that every pound of that levy is going to go on the thing they care most about, which is the NHS and social care. And the way we're doing it, I believe, is progressive. Those with the broader shoulders will bear the biggest burden from it. The top 15% of taxpayers will contribute around half of the revenues from that. And as I said, it's dedicated and specific, so people will know that all the money is going to the thing that they care most about. And on your second question, again, this question for the Prime Minister, I think he was right to say what he said in Parliament just recently and before. He's apologised for that. He said he's going to fix it. He's acknowledged all of the recommendations from Sue Gray's report, and you'll expect to hear more from them, as he said, about the changes that he's planning to make. And that's why he has my support, and I'm glad that he's doing what he's doing. Lucy from the Telegraph. There you are. Hi.
Hi, Lucy Fisher from the Telegraph. Chancellor, when you look at the levies on energy bills, the looming council tax rises, the increase in national insurance, the income tax threshold freezes, and hear the Bank of England Governor warn today that the public face the biggest fall in living standards in at least 30 years, is there a point as a Conservative Chancellor that you step in and say people are paying too much tax?
Well, Lucy, you're right to list some of them, or many of the challenges that people are facing, and I very much acknowledge that we are grappling with some of them. Families are grappling with those challenges. But I think you can point to some things on the other side of the ledger as well that are going to make a difference. Obviously, the announcements today, £350 for the vast majority of families, I think is a significant amount, and it will make a difference to people. The national living wage is going up by 6.6% in April to £9.50 an hour. That's quite a significant increase. It's worth about £1,000 a year for someone earning the national living wage, as millions of people do. The universal credit taper rate cut that we announced last year, which essentially is a tax cut for those on the lowest incomes. Again, for a single mother who's working full-time on the national living wage, that's worth about £1,200 extra a year in their pocket. So that will help with frozen fuel duty, and we have, as we've discussed with Robert's question, lots of other schemes to help people in need with energy costs. So, I think, look, when I look at the picture, of course there are challenges, but there are things we were doing to help people. And to Jason's question earlier, we are making sure that we also address the other thing that they care about, which is having an NHS that's well funded, that can make sure they don't wait years and years for the treatment that they desperately want for them and their families. I think people care about that as well. Going forward, I point you to what I said at the budget in autumn last year. My goal, my mission over the remainder of this Parliament is to cut people's taxes. That's what I want to deliver. I think that's what the country would like to see. They appreciate, I would hope, that we've been through, as I said, once in a 300-year economic shock, borrowing gone to the highest level since World War II, and we do need to fix that, but we are well on our way to rebuilding our economy. If you look at what's happening with people in work and wages, business investment, all of those signs are really positive. So there's lots that we feel confident about. I know that there are some challenges ahead, but longer term, I feel confident about being able to deliver on my pledge to reduce people's taxes. And we made a start of that by cutting taxes for those on the lowest paid last autumn. And that is a sign of where we want to go in the future as well. David from Reuters. Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Chancellor, sort of earlier today, the Bank of England sort of raised interest rates. And it said that wasn't just to do with sort of higher energy costs, but also sort of growing cost pressures and also sort of wage pressures in the economy. And that some businesses it spoke to thought that wages might need to go up by 5% sort of this year. And I know that sort of last year, you and the Prime Minister talked about the need for a high wage economy. But in the short term, is wage restraint something that you would welcome in the private sector and think there needs to be in the public sector?
Well, David, obviously monetary policy is independent for the Bank of England, so I'll leave Andrew and the governor to deal with that. With regard to wages, it's not my job to set wages in the private sector, right? And all I'd say is, yes, of course, I want a high wage economy. Who doesn't? The right way to get there is to drive up productivity, right? We want to make sure that those wages are a reflection of the fact that we are producing more, doing more, and the best way to get that productivity increase is to have businesses invest, and that's why we've got interventions like the super deduction, which is a very generous tax incentive for companies to invest. And we know companies are sitting on quite a bit of cash, and it'd be good for the economy if we can unlock that, get them investing. And that, if you look at all the surveys, whether it's the CBI, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, all of them point to business investment intentions being actually very high levels. So that's a promising sign for driving up growth and productivity if we can unlock investment. And then the other part of it is by investing in people, in their skills. And the spending review last year, we announced, I think, a £3.5 billion increase in the amount of money that we spend on skills. It's a 26% real increase. So it's almost unprecedented for a parliament to spend that much more on skills. But it's really important. So if you're an adult who doesn't have a level 3 qualification, for example, it's equivalent of an A level, and there are about 9 or 10 million adults in our country who don't, for the first time, actually, the government at any age that you are will fully fund you to get one of those qualifications. That cost about £3,000, but we know it will make an enormous difference to your chance of getting a job, or if you're in work, earning more as a result of those new skills you acquire. And that's just one of the many things we're doing. There's traineeships, apprenticeships, sector-based work academies, skill boot camps. All of these things are new interventions that will help people get the skills they need to get higher productivity, higher wage jobs. That's the right long-term approach for us to get there. Look, of course, it doesn't happen overnight, but I'm confident we're doing all the right things that put us on that path to getting there over time. Thomas from Business Insider. Thomas.
Thanks, Chancellor. The plan to give energy rebates to households in certain council tax bands means 2.2 million of people on lowest incomes won't automatically benefit. Meanwhile, many of those in the highest household incomes will benefit. Do you accept it's a poorly targeted tax, basing it on property values from 30 years ago? And secondly, just to follow up, would you welcome a full apology from the Prime Minister regarding his comments to Keir Starmer earlier this week?
So, Thomas, on your second question, I haven't got anything to add to what I've said to the previous answers. But on your first question, I probably don't accept that. Look, there's no perfect way when you design policy that has to work on this scale for it to be perfectly targeted, right? So there's no way to perfectly do it. I can't sit here and figure out the individual circumstances of all 28 million households that we're trying to get support to. So I accept that nothing is perfect. But to your point specifically about lower income households who happen to live in higher council tax bands? That is a reasonable question, and we have looked at that specifically, and that's why we've created a discretionary fund of about £150 million that will be given to local authorities specifically to help exactly those people. Now, by our estimates, there are around 300,000 people actually. So, for example, who are on low income or on benefits, who happen to live in council tax bands higher than Band D. So we've actually given more than the money needed for them, so that there's a bit of extra cushion, so that local authorities can find those people and get them the support they need. I think that's very fair, but we've made a provision for that, as I said, through this discretionary fund. And other than that, I think the council tax system is a good way to deliver support. It's the only other part of our entire tax system that works on a household basis, and if you think about it, you pay energy bills as a household, so this is a way to think about people as a household, so that's sensible. And the other thing is it's quick. Right, lots of other things take a long time to figure out. For example, the rebate, that will kick in October because there's statutory consultations and operational things to work through. The council tax system is really fast. Councils do a brilliant job for us. The systems are set up so people will feel that £150 in April, and that's really good, I think, actually, and that's one of the benefits of using that system to do that. And I think I've got a bit of time to take a couple more if I'm being not hurried out. So I don't know who we've got here. Is Natasha here or not? Natasha, do you have a question? There you are. Hi.
Yeah, sorry to press you on the Munira Mirza question. Do you think the Prime Minister should say sorry for his comments? Do you feel it would help to move on from the whole situation? Could I just ask you, some of your colleagues have said that you're, Labour light and unconservative for your raising taxes and giving people money to pay their energy bills. Do you agree with them?
Natesh, thanks. Look, so on your first question, again, I just have to repeat what I've said before. Obviously, that's for the Prime Minister to decide, but I'm glad he clarified what he meant earlier today. And as I said, I'll miss working with Munira. To your second question, look, for me, being a Conservative, part of that is about being responsible with people's money and being responsible with the public finances. That's really important to me. I think that's what people expect, quite frankly, from a Conservative government or from a Conservative Chancellor. I think I'd hope that people understand we were faced with an enormous shock, and that meant that borrowing skyrocketed up to levels that we haven't seen since World War II, and it's going to take us a little bit of time to fix that. But fixing it is the right thing to do. It's the responsible thing to do. It's not always easy to do these difficult things, but as long as I have this job, I'm going to try and do what I believe to be right in the long-term interests of the country. And actually, this energy situation is a good example of why it's important, because as I've made the case previously to you and others, that we need to have the resilience to respond to future shocks. And look, if you think in the last 10 years, we've had two supposedly once-in-a-century events. We had the financial crisis, which Robert spent every minute covering, and Ed and others. And then we had, obviously, coronavirus. They happened in the space of a decade. I was really fortunate that because my predecessors had taken some difficult decisions when they had this job, I was able to respond comprehensively and generously to support the country, families, businesses through that crisis. And now, again, we're faced with another thing with energy. I want to be able to respond. And because we've taken some difficult decisions already to get things in a better place, I can do that. But I want whoever's in this job in the future to hopefully have benefited from the tough things that I did so that they can support the country when the time comes again. And I think that is a deeply Conservative thing to do. I think people understand we have to live within our means. I think they get that. They'd expect that from us. And that's what I will deliver as long as I'm doing this. George, I saw you had your hand up.
George Parker from the FT. You'll see the analysts saying that they think it's possible the energy price cap could go up to as high as £2,400 in October. Could you exclude now the possibility you'll have to do even more in the autumn to help families? And just a second one, again on Munira Mirza. You said you enjoyed working with her. I just wondered if you just say what you thought she brought to the government.
Right. So on your first question, as I said before, there's global forces at play here that drive up gas prices at the moment, and I don't have a crystal ball. You're right, the current energy markets are forecasting that prices go up further in October before falling quite significantly next spring. But again, I don't have a crystal ball and these things are uncertain. I think the interventions we've done today are designed to last and provide support to people over the year. We're front loading it, so the £150 of the £350 comes all in one go at the beginning. But then in October, let's say the price cap does go up again, then that's when the £200 rebate will also kick in at that moment. So there will be help at that time if that is indeed what happens. So I think over the course of a year is the best way to think about it. There's £350 of support for the vast majority of families to help them over the year with this. And again, I'll just go back to what I said. Like, I've got to be honest, I don't want to pretend that we don't have to adjust to higher energy prices, if that's what the world is having to do. But what we can do is just slow the pace of that down, make it more manageable for people's household finances. And look, I'm not going to get into a big thing about Munira. So she's a valued colleague. She brought a lot to the job, and I'll miss working with her. Great. Yes. If I've got one more, right? Go on. Yeah.
Hi, Simon Neville from PA. Just want to get my head around this. I'm not going to call it a bailout, but I think some people have called it that. Energy firms were asking for a similar package for quite a few months. We've known that the energy prices were going to go up for quite some time. Back then, it was rejected. The call, I think 20 billion was the number that was put on it by the firms. What changed that meant now you decided it was the right call to make? And the other question I wanted to ask was around national insurance. You're giving households the opportunity to delay their payments on their energy bills. Why not give them the opportunity to delay their payments for national insurance?
So I think in terms of the difference, they're two very different things, right? We're putting in place a new dedicated health and social care levy so that people can feel reassured that every pound of that is going to the thing that they care most about, which is the NHS. And it means we can make a start on tackling the backlogs as quickly as possible and start reforming social care. I think that's the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do, as I've outlined. But where we can make a difference on these energy prices, we are. And part of the response is to smooth the impact of that. And that is a very deliberate policy approach. As it can't pretend that we don't have to adjust to it, but what we can do is just make it more manageable, and that's what that policy does. With regard to your first question, I wouldn't describe it as a bailout, and I think actually what that was is something very different. We are not providing loans to energy companies. Well, what we are doing is discounting people's bills by £200. We're using their energy bill as a means to do that, but in no way, shape or form is this a bailout of energy companies. It's absolutely not. This is help to families, to households, just delivered through their energy bills and then ultimately recovered through their energy bills in the future. So I think it's very different to what some people were calling for. And I think it's the right intervention. And many have called for some smoothing mechanism, because when you're faced with a shock of this magnitude, the sensible thing for governments to do, as I said, is not to pretend that it doesn't exist, but to help ease the burden of it by spreading it over some years. But look, thank you all very much. That was hopefully helpful, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.